I said, isn't it true that you gave my client, after she had broken up, that you had given her a sex toy, a dildo? And he says, yes. But it wasn't like that, man.
Oh,
It
okay.
was a mantelpiece dildo. It was a work of art. He said it was a artistic dildo. Welcome to another great episode of Cases Gone Wild, brought to you by me, Jon Marko, and Marko Law. Today we have a tantalizing show for you with a very special guest and Wayne County judicial candidate. She could be your judge, so you better tune in. Please, if you like our show, write us a review, share it with people, give us a thumbs up, and remember, we got a camera crew. We're filming live. Today I'd like to introduce a great attorney, a great person, and who's going to make a great judge, Macie Gains. Macie, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Well, welcome to Cases Gone Wild. I hope you have brought some crazy cases with you today.
I hope I did too. but probate does have their share of crazy cases.
Yes. I'll tell Macie, you went to University of Arizona. You were born in LA, right?
Yes, born and raised in LA.
Born on the West Coast. You
Yep.
went to law school right downtown Detroit at UDM, right?
Yes.
And you graduated in 2013, and you now practice with your husband, Robbie Gains, great guy.
Yes, absolutely.
And
he's
you
all right.
do probate. Yeah, he's all right. He's all right. Robbie, you can send your criticisms in after the show.
Yes, or your comments and reviews.
The comments, that's right. So you do probate law. So tell the listeners, what is probate?
So probate is like a law directed at protecting vulnerable people. So it deals with like guardianships, conservatorships, decedent estates, trust work, mental health docket, and the developmentally delayed docket or disabled docket. And it really does like aim towards protecting the vulnerable and their money and it's often when people cannot make decisions on their own. So
Yeah, I mean, this is a very important, kind of almost uncomfortable area, but that's absolutely necessary for society, right? Like people who get mental illness or are elderly who can't take care of themselves and need help by other people to make decisions for them and whatnot.
Absolutely. It's very necessary. And a lot of times it's really sad because a lot of people don't know what probate is until they actually need it. Like somebody got in a car accident, somebody died, somebody had a life-altering issue. So it is important. It's preventable, but also very necessary every day.
Yeah, a lot of bad things happen that require probate. You know, it's kind of like with my work, personal injury, I always say, people don't call me because good things happen, right? It's like there's been a catastrophe, there's been a disaster, somebody's needs help, and then we have to come in, right?
Yeah, it's generally probably the most traumatizing time of their life. Really. Yeah.
And so I understand you spent your whole life, a whole legal life, practicing in this area of the law called probate, and now you're running for Wayne County probate judge. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what a probate judge does and how, if people don't know, in Wayne County, and I think maybe most counties, there's certain judges who all they do is probate, right? They don't you don't get my car accident cases or civil rights cases. You don't get business cases. You don't get criminal cases. If you become a probate judge, all you do is probate work? Tell us.
Everything is so distinct about probate because it's its own little court. So there's the Third Circuit Court, there's Frank Murphy, there's a juvenile court, and then there's probate, which is on the 12th and 13th floor of KMAC. And it has its own docket, its own jurisdiction. It can have concurrent jurisdiction with the civil court, but a lot of times if there's a civil case open, the probate court is going to defer to the civil court.
Yeah.
So what the judges decide on often and frequently is the appointment of guardians, the appointment of conservators, and the conservators are the ones who manage one's financial affairs and assets, or the appointment of someone over an estate or a trust, and then work with dealing with distribution of assets. So that's a lot of times, and often, or I guess every week, the judges will address like the mental health docket. So there's a host of cases that come through the mental health docket because they have to come when somebody is involuntarily hospitalized. In addition to that, there's the developmentally disabled docket that deals with those who have, I guess, conditions or diagnoses that originate from birth, so like autism, dyslexia, cognitive impairment, those type of things that didn't necessarily happen over time. They were born with it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, there is interplay between what I do as a litigator, civil litigator, and probate. So, for example, I did a case, we talked about it on another show, where a man was hit by a tire that came off a vehicle. He had a serious brain injury, and we were going to trial, and this man was not able to make independent decisions. He couldn't manage his own money. He couldn't even testify at trial. He couldn't make medical decisions, and he was sick. I mean, because of this brain injury, he wasn't getting help. And so we had to go to probate court, and I guess a probate judge, like what you're running for right now in Wayne County, had to appoint a legal professional to manage those affairs, to basically manage his money, manage the verdict and things.
And probably likely go through the settlement, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a lot of the fun part about probate as a practitioner is that it does touch every area of law. So there is like a lot of the personal injury suits or wrongful death suits. There's often people who need a representative to make decisions as a result of the injury. There's also been a lot of fun other cases that I've had, like a host of old Motown artists. They needed estates open. And so what we do is open them and then deal with the record companies to get the royalties to their families. Or you have landlord tenant. I mean, you get an estate, you get a trust, and there's occupants in the home. So it really touches every little area, sometimes criminal as well, if they're fighting over the assets and end up with felonies for assault.
Yeah. You know, like I had cases where somebody gets hurt or killed, and then they have to open what's called an estate, and that has to go through probate, right? When you open an estate.
Yes.
So it's dealing with all these different areas. So, all right, tell the listeners, since when's the election? So you're running for probate judge. You spent your whole life, legal life, in probate. I know you have a passion for probate. You've told me about that before. Tell our listeners about the election, how it works, and why they should vote for you.
So we have four candidates, 2 seats, and we go straight to November 5th. So that's the general election. Yes, that is the general election.
So the same election when we're voting for president and everybody else in that election?
Absolutely. And we have 3 men, 1 woman, which is myself.
Okay.
And why they should vote for me is likely because I do have the specialized knowledge. Like I said, probate is not civil, it's not criminal, it's not juvenile, it's not family, it's its own little area of law that does require the knowledge of the law, experience with it, and how the court dynamics run. So I think it's really important to have that. Also, obviously, I'm a woman, and there is only one other woman on the bench who I believe is retiring in 2 years.
Really? In all the probate court in Wayne County?
Yes.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so she ages out, I believe, in 26.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the future of the court is not female. Until we vote on November 5th.
So, and just so our listeners understand, this is a county race, right? Because the judges for the Wayne County probate, so you have to be in Wayne County to be able to vote, because each court, county court or probate court is by county, right?
Yes.
And there's 2 openings. And here in Michigan, believe it or not, unless you get appointed by the governor, we elect our judges. It's by vote of the people, right?
It is. Absolutely.
So that's very interesting. So if you're a Wayne County voter, if you live in the county of Wayne, then you can vote on the general ballot this November for probate judge, which you're running for.
Yes. And the most important thing also to remember is to flip the ballot over. So especially in presidential years, the nonpartisan races are on the back of the ballot. And there is almost like a 40 to 50% drop between people who vote for the front and forget to flip it over.
So you got to flip those ballots.
Flip those ballots to see the judicial races. And I think they're very important because not only because I'm running, but because a judge is more likely to personally touch someone or touch a voter than like a senator or even a state rep or the president.
Yeah.
Like judges, whether people think that you're going to court because you're in trouble, but you can end up in court for something positive, something negative, but that's not criminal.
Right.
And a judge is, again, likely to touch you.
And probate touches everything. Everybody's going to need probate lawyer, whether we like it or not, because somebody's going to die. There's going to be some type of things in our lives where you have to go through probate, right?
Absolutely.
One thing that I have found is that, look, you don't know how important it is to have good judges until you need one, right? Because we go through life.
Oh, yes.
And it's like, we all hope we're never going to have to be in front. But then when you're in front of that judge, it's like, man, this is why we want good judges, because you're right. They can make a big difference in people's lives.
And I'm sure you've had like your share of good judges and bad judges.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you know which ones practiced in the area, which ones did not, whether you look them up or just learned by being in the courtroom.
Right.
So it's so important. It really is.
It really is. It really is. Well, good luck. We wish you the best of luck in the campaign. I know you'll be an excellent probate judge for the people of Wayne County.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let's talk. You know that we're not just here to talk about your judgeship. We need to talk about the craziest, wildest cases that you've done. So I understand that you have represented some famous, well-known people in your career. You told us about some Motown stuff. I understand you represented a famous congressperson in the past, or you were involved in a case involving a congressperson?
Yeah, I was actually involved in his estate, and it was very interesting, crazy. I did feel like I was in the twilight zone when I read the initial pleading and the family had called me. So what happens generally in a probate office is a loved one calls and says, somebody passed away, we need to file this. Or somebody passed away and another person filed to open an estate. And that's what happened here. And it was an interesting case because he was probably the longest standing congressman in the state of Michigan, very well known. And it was a year after he passed away that two people, a brother and sister, 57 and 63,
wow,
filed a petition to open an estate to establish that he was their father. And
so these two people filed in court, in probate court, and said that this dead congressman who had passed away like a year before was their dad, or essentially?
Yes, and it was very clear, like that he had a wife and he had these two children and they had their nuclear family, and that was the family. Like that.
So what would the advantage be if they were biologically his children? Would they get part of the money that he had, or what was the point? I mean, other than like maybe notoriety for these people.
Well, they would benefit. They would have gotten a share of the estate after his wife took a certain portion. But yes, there wasn't a will in place. So they would have absolutely taken a share based on being his children. I think their goal was money. Absolutely. I don't think notoriety was the goal for these two. But it was money. But then eventually when they found out that everything passed outside of probate, they then said they wanted closure. So it was interesting.
Always about the money. You know, we've seen these in the news, like a famous person, and then somebody says, oh, that's my dad, right? And then, so can the court, how does this work? Can the court order, like if somebody came and said, Jon Marko is my dad, can they like order like a blood test, or how does that work?
Well, that's the interesting part, because it became like an intersect between family law and the Paternity Act, and then the Estate and Protected Individuals Code, which made it like a very interesting case. There wasn't a lot of case law on this, obviously. I did find cases where person was pregnant, father was killed in line of duty, police officer. They needed to establish that the unborn baby that it was eventually born could take from the wrongful death case. So that was like one of the leading cases that I've seen in this situation. But what it takes under the Paternity Act is you have to obviously take a paternity test. It has to be like 99% chance that the person is actually the parent. But the reason why this was crazy, I guess, is because he was not alive. So you have to first establish that this person is the father by clear and convincing evidence. And then after that, you have to petition the court to ask to exhume the body, I assume, to take his DNA.
No way.
They
So
also have like
dig up-
collateral DNA where you can take that. But in the case that leads, it was the decedent's parents. And the congressman was 90. His parents were no longer alive to take their DNA.
So did they ask the court to dig up this dead congressman's corpse so they could test it for DNA?
That was the direction it was going. And the judge was great because he had us pretty much like brief it and explain why this should not happen. And it's a very extreme request.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine like if my loved one passed away and then somebody came out of the woodwork and said that they wanted to dig up his body, his or her body, and start testing it. That's a serious thing.
And the clear and convincing evidence standard is really high. So when they were asking, well, let's rewind it. Their parents were happily married for a very long time, for decades. So they had a father. They had a father on their birth certificate. They were a product of a marriage. Their parents died married. There was never a divorce. And so that's what led me to believe that there has to be like a monetary goal or monetary. There's
but
no
conceivably
notoriety.
it could happen. You know, you hear about these things in the news like secret babies or, you know, that they hide. But what was their evidence that this famous congressman was the father? I mean, don't they have to have some proof? Or?
They have to have proof. They had an affidavit from a sister of their mother, so their aunt, saying that she believed that they were together because the congressman had sent somebody to her funeral, the mother's funeral.
That's it? That's
Which
pretty
congressman,
flimsy.
he arguably attended thousands of funerals in his lifetime.
Yeah,
in
you
his
better be
official
careful out
capacity.
there. You attend a funeral, they
Do
could
not
be
attend the funeral.
could be exhuming your loved ones' bodies. That's crazy.
Yes.
That was it? That was the only evidence?
Well, they testified, and that was just a whole disaster.
Well,
I
what
mean,
did they say?
First, they were saying that he would come to their home and read books to them at night.
Okay.
Good night story.
But like climb in the window to read books? Or
That's
like,
what I asked. I asked it because I was like, "Would your father?" I asked that in testimony because I was like, I really need to illustrate this. Your parents were married. Your father was home. Like we established where they worked, their work hours.
Yeah.
So around 10 o'clock at night, I mean, that's
10 o'clock at night. It's like the congressman climbed in the window to read us
That's what
a
it
story.
was.
Come
And
on.
then some of the times were
This
like
is
not even when he was a
crazy.
congressman. And his wife had like established that he was like, I think he was in the military. So he was like gone. And it was just getting wilder and wilder. They said that he read books to them. Then after we kind of, attacked that on cross-exam, they
What
said
kind of books, by the way?
bedtime stories.
Like
That-
one fish, two fish, three fish?
There was no detail.
Oh, the places you'll go, Dr. Seuss, or what?
Yes, there was no details. The ages were so off. Like with knowing that they were 63 and 57, he was 90. They didn't think about the age.
It just didn't add up. So you think they were making it up?
They were absolutely, and I mean, they both testified. They said that they visited the congressional office as children, and congressmen had visited their schools before, which again is thousands of kids.
Yeah, right.
That
A
could
lot of
potentially-
congressmen visit schools. I mean,
That's their thing.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I
So-
bet you visit schools running for probate judge.
all the time.
Yeah.
So I am the mother of every
Yeah,
child
be
that I've
careful
come
out there.
across.
Yeah. So that's a wild case. So what ended up happening? Like,
So they obviously I was begging for fees, but that didn't happen. We pretty much argued it, took testimony. They couldn't establish that. I mean, the beginning that their father was not actually their father. To then say they then couldn't establish that congressman by any means, like they'd never put the two in the same place ever.
yeah.
And then that would have just been extreme because what they were going to ask is instead of having Congressman's parents would have been, which would have established like I forgot what it was called, like collateral DNA. They wanted his children who are alive to do it. And I thought that was very extreme because it interferes with like their grief, their love, and it destroys whatever they ever thought about him, which was crazy. And I thought it was also meant to like tarnish his reputation. And in the collateral DNA analysis, you have to balance like factors. There's a balancing test. And to do that to the congressman, I think would have been absurd. And crazy.
Yeah, I didn't know about this, and this is a wild thing, but it seems kind of cruel. Like if I've had loved ones who have passed away and are no longer here. It's a difficult time, and if it's true that these people made this up, that's a very cruel thing because it tarnishes the reputation, which is all we have, and a lot of Congress people have spent their life trying to build and maintain their reputation. It's cruel to the family who's trying to grieve, and even if you're wondering, oh my God, is this true? I mean, even if there's like a hint, and then they have to pay a lawyer. I'm sure they had to hire you and then go to court. That's pretty cruel.
To defend it and keep it like quiet, which would, it's very cruel. Like there's no regard for the family. He has young kids, and the wife as well. And when they found out that there was no money to be transferred to them, they started making like this I need closure argument because they need to know who their true father is. They made a circus of the court because what the probate court is it's not a paternity court, and it's also not like a closure court. You don't go there to get closure and like really shame the dead while you're in there. For what? I don't know.
So you won the case.
Yes.
And that's awesome. And you said that you've done some other celebrity cases as well, some Motown people. Do you find when you do a celebrity case that it's different than another case? And I don't mean different under the law, but I mean, is there certain challenges, or do judges maybe look at it a little more carefully? Like, tell me about your experiences in celebrity cases, because I've done a lot of celebrity cases as well.
I found that it makes me a little bit more cautious about the things that I'll include. Like I would include enough to get the job done, but I wouldn't disclose as much. I guess I'm more limited on what I would disclose for the sake of argument. Public record, yeah. And then the family, in probate, their family died. So it's like, let's try to keep their reputation as pure as possible. So we let out only what we can, what we need at that point
to get the job done.
Yes, I think the judges are I think they've been very receptive and open to all of the cases, none of which have really been closed, like off to the public or anything.
Yeah.
But I think that they do take they do like, I haven't had a bad experience where they didn't look at the facts and they didn't weigh everything out and make good rulings.
And just so our listeners know, like, courts are open to the public, right? That's part of our American system of justice. Is we don't have what in England they used to call it the Star Chamber, where they'd have secret trials. In Russia, it was the Politburo. But part of our American system of justice that a lot of people don't realize how important it is, it's that our courts are open. As a citizen, you can go and watch any trial it's open to the public. You can go and access any court record. Generally, unless it's sealed, which is very, very rare. But you can go and access court records. You can read the evidence. You can pull the files. That's how we have these documentaries on these court cases, or we saw the Johnny Depp case, or we see the O.J. Simpson case, or anything. And most cases are really not in the public eye. Like you get hit by a car, unless there's some reason, it's not going to be, and the general run-of-the-mill probate case probably is not going to be in the news. But when you have a famous client or a famous case, a lot of time the news or the public is looking at what's going on, right?
Yes, and like with those, often with the news, it is a nice tool
Yeah.
to help preserve their legacy, especially since they passed away. So like the comments would be limited, but also helpful
Yeah.
to kind of explain what is going on and how we will protect their legacy and reputation.
Yeah. I mean, look at Johnny Depp, right? That was all over the news. Johnny Depp won the trial, right? I don't know if you followed the Johnny Depp trial.
I did.
I'm just using that as an example, but I think in a way because he receives vindication in the courtroom, regardless of, what you think about that case. Did I ever tell you about my Kid Rock case?
No, tell me, please.
Okay. All right.
Please.
So I had a case when I was young, and do you know who the Insane Clown Posse?
I do.
Okay. So ICP, just for our listeners, this is a rap group, Detroit-based. They would spray Faygo on their fans. They would paint their faces.
I didn't know they were from Detroit.
Yeah, believe it or not.
That's horrible, yes.
Yep, ICP. So they had Psychopathic Records was their label, and I represented a woman who was their in-house legal counsel, and also their worked and helped them with marketing. And she was harassed at work, okay? And it was not a good environment. She was sexually harassed. They did all kinds of stuff. And so after she had enough, she couldn't deal with it anymore. She complained. She ended up getting fired or left. I don't remember the exact terms, but it was too much. And so she filed a lawsuit. And so this was probably one of my first celebrity lawsuits because it was all over the news. I think it was on TMZ. And so we sued the Insane Clown Posse and Psychopathic Records. And this was in Oakland County. And I'll tell you how Kid Rock got involved. So we had to take a deposition in the case of one of the people that were involved by the name of Dan Diamond. His stage name was Dirty Dan, okay? And he had Dirty Dan Diamond, okay?
Oh, yes.
And so one of the allegations that was in the lawsuit was that Dirty Dan Diamond had, after my client had gone through a breakup with her boyfriend at the time, she was kind of down and sad. Dirty Dan, who, among other things that was alleged that he had done to harass her, gave her a dildo, okay, a sex toy. She said, I don't want it. He's like, you should take it and use it. Very offensive. She was very upset. So I'm a young lawyer and I have to fly out to Las Vegas to do a deposition because that's where Dirty Dan Diamond was at the time. I was really excited, so we flew out to Las Vegas and we did what's called a deposition. So we put Dan Diamond under oath and we started deposing him about, what did or didn't happen. And, in these cases, a lot of times people will deny things or, whatever. So when I said, isn't it true that you gave my client, after she had broken up, that you had given her a sex toy, a dildo? And he says, yes. But it wasn't like that, man.
Oh, okay.
It was a mantelpiece dildo. It was a work of art. He said it was a artistic dildo. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, this was the type of dildo that was made out of glass. It had a stand and you put it on your mantelpiece. And it was a real work of art. It was a type of dildo that you use as artwork in your house, which I had not heard of.
I need to know more. Like what?
Well, so I said, okay, we're going to have to show the jury this artwork because you're saying it wasn't offensive. So I said, please produce. Where's the dildo? He goes, I can't produce it, man. I go, why not? He goes, I gifted it to somebody else after your client didn't want it. Who did you gift it to? He says, Kid Rock. Okay. And he goes, it's on Kid Rock's mantle. So I said, all right, well, I'm not going to get to talk to you again. In case we can't find it, I want you to draw the dildo. So we're going to show the viewers right now. I actually pulled this exhibit from the deposition, which we're going to show the viewers. You can see it right now. So this is what he drew, this dildo.
Oh, man.
And so I left Las Vegas after this deposition, and I sent a subpoena to Kid Rock. And I had Kid Rock serve with a subpoena that said, we're demanding production of the dildo that was given to you by Dirty Dan Diamond. You can't make this stuff up, right?
Yeah, that's very specific.
Oh, yeah. It was wild. So I was a young lawyer. So Kid Rock wrote me this letter in response that he put on his website. I'm sure somebody can still find it. Maybe we can find it. We'll put it on this show by the time it airs. That said, like, Jon Marko, you're a loser. I don't have your stupid dildo. I don't know where the dildo is. I never had the dildo. And he also really took it to everyone else that was involved. Dirty Dan Diamond, everybody
You need
else.
to put that letter on your website.
Yeah, I want to find it because I remember going. So Kid Rock wrote this letter. It was all over TMZ. It was all over the news. If you Google Kid Rock, Jon Marko, you can see this hate letter from Kid Rock, which I take as a badge of honor that Kid Rock took the time to write me a letter that he didn't have the dildo. We still don't know where the dildo is. It's missing. We never found it. We were never able to locate it. We only have Dirty Dan Diamond's rendition of the dildo that he drew for us that I showed you guys. But that was it. And so that was a very interesting, that was probably my first brush with fame as a unknown lawyer, having Kid Rock write him a letter. And I remember going to court and the attorneys, everybody knew about it, because it was all over every news. And they were laughing and stuff. And I said, you guys can laugh all you want, but Kid Rock hasn't written you guys a letter, when was the last time you had a letter written? So
I would frame that one. And to casually and professionally write about a dildo is the funny part.
Yeah.
Oh, what a mess. How'd it turn out?
So the case, all I'm allowed to say is the case has been resolved.
Right.
Okay. We didn't go to trial. The case has been resolved. And,
nice.
But it was a interesting case. It was fun. It's always interesting when there's kind of a spotlight on everything, but, yeah. And then I got to depose the ICP, the Insane Clown Posse, and I made friends with the defense attorney who represented Dirty Dan, who's a good guy. It was a good, interesting case, but yeah.
We've had some famous ones or not so famous. They're basically because Motown's so old and a lot of people weren't writing paper contracts back in the day.
Yeah, it was loosey-goosey, right?
It was very. And one of my most dynamic cases, I think, that kind of got me into the entertainment cases was a man named Tony Hester. Now, he's not a famous Motown artist, but he was actually found dead on a bus stop. He, they said he was a drug addict, he was gay, all of these different rumors. Not sure if any of them were true, but he passed away. But his I think it's his cousin or his aunt came in saying he's a famous drummer, right? And he's done all these songs and blah, 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 blah. So we get the death certificate.
But you never know, right?
You don't.
You never know.
The royalties are never going to end. So what we had discovered, just sending subpoenas and to every record label, Sony, all of these different ones, he ended up having Notorious B.I.G. used a lot of his work.
No way. So it was true?
Clan. It was all true. His estate is still going. His estate is still active, and it's been years, 20 years.
No way.
Working on his estate. And what happens is you just leave it open, and the royalties come in, and you just distribute them to the heirs. But there was so much back pay with all of these royalties that
he hadn't been getting. This poor guy was owed all this money.
He was homeless, living in a bus stop.
That is so sad.
Yes. So, these things are really interesting.
It really happens.
And they're never going to reach out and say, hey, you have these royalty checks. Who can come get them? And it was sad, actually, because he was he was homeless.
Yeah.
And now his family, definitely benefits from it. But it's
that poor guy. He should have had that money when he was alive.
He's touched so many songs, though. Every soundtrack in these older movies, he's touched. And so I thought that was really interesting because you just don't ever know.
You just don't know. That's wild.
Yes.
That's really wild.
And they'll hold the money, Sony, any of them, Universal, all of those record companies hold it. And there's a lot of smaller record companies during the Motown era that dissolved, but they dissolved into the bigger ones.
Okay.
So that is another reason why a lot of people weren't pursuing it, because they thought the record company closed. but they just kind of got swallowed or merged into the bigger,
And
larger
this is
ones.
why you need a good probate attorney, right?
Yes.
Like, set it up. Don't wait. It's something
Yes.
that we don't want to think about. We don't want to deal with. Nobody wants to think about the worst of the worst happening, but you have to. I mean, I met with an attorney a couple weeks ago to do trusts and stuff. It's things that we don't like to do. It's not comfortable. It's like, going to the doctor or, taking a beat up car in to have them look at it and tell you all these, it's a sad type of thing to think about, but you have to do it.
You do. And like, if there's like any lifetime, I mean, I can say I did delay a little bit on doing my trust, doing all of our estate plans. And then something had happened, not in our lives, but in someone else's, that made me think. And I was like, let's just sit down. There's
sit
no
down and
reason
do
why we don't have this set up.
Just get it out of the way. Yeah. So what else? So you told me that you've done some caretaking cases, and I've seen in my practice a lot. Well, guardians and conservators are awesome. There's a lot of great guardians and conservators out there. They're also in a position like anybody else who has a position of authority over somebody to take advantage of people and to abuse their situations. Have you ever seen anything like that of guardians or caretakers kind of gone bad?
Oh yes, and it's like I was a probate professor before, and it's always like my example.
Yeah.
or like the Anna Nicole case. Like there's always those cases, but yeah, I had a case a while back, and this one was a APS, Adult Protective Services report was filed by Chase Bank. So the bank, at some point, the tellers do have some type of duty or authority to file
I didn't
these.
know that.
Yes, if
they see like an old man
something
getting
weird.
brought in by somebody who's like taking all the money, they can report it.
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
Absolutely. And we've had that a couple times. I have one, which was interesting. One came in, he was a veteran. He had a lot of money, and he kept being walked into the bank, and he would change the titles to his bank account. He would take out large sums of money.
Oh, no.
And he would sign an X. And so, the bank's like, hey, I don't know. He might be okay. He might not, but we have to be careful. And so,
Better safe than sorry, I think, right?
Yes, absolutely. So we kind of, we file a petition, look for get a conservator or the appointment of a conservator to see what's going on. As we go into it, his kids come into the case, and they're like, my dad is fine. He's perfectly fine. He's functioning. He has a great home. He's living this great life. We're like, okay, well, let me see these bank statements, and on this one, it was very interesting because he had, a conversion van that was a party bus. Like he had so many different things. So I was like, I need to look at this man's house. I drive up to his house. He has a mattress in his living room.
No.
Yes. And that's how he's living with the
He was
TV
living by himself?
and alcohol. Yes.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah. So that's,
And the kids were driving around in a party bus or something?
they said that he wanted it. Like he wanted the party bus and he wanted the conversion van. And it wasn't just a conversion van. This is where I really learned about conversion vans. See, probate takes you everywhere, because I had to Google this, and because I'm like, what kind of van is like $100,000? And it was like, it had everything in it. You could live in this van.
It's like a Pit My Ride van.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild.
I don't know if they were making money off of it or what, but eventually we had to take it, secure it, resell it so that he has money to live and he's not living on a mattress.
It's just so sad. I feel like frauds, anybody can be defrauded, but I feel like the elderly are more susceptible, and they're targeted more, right? Because of, especially if somebody's not looking out for them, if somebody's not there. And that's just really sad with scams, even by their own family, by caretakers, anybody.
There was another one, and it's another Chase Bank. They filed the report. I go to visit the man. He's
Shout
about
out to
90.
Chase Bank.
Yes, I know. It's Chase Bank. I bank
Protecting
with
these
Chase.
elderly,
I
yeah.
definitely, I bank with them now. I visit the man. He's about 93, and he has a disabled son. So I go to Livonia. I need to, I want to scope out the scene. And he seemed pretty happy, but you could tell that he's not all the way there. His house is nice, very nice, furnished, food, well taken care of, different than the other case, right? So I'm like, oh, looks like everything's fine around here. talking to him. I'm like, are you married? Do you have kids? He's explaining. She passed away, and he's living as long as he can to take care of his disabled son, because his disabled son was like 70.
Yeah.
And he lived with them. And so we're talking, and he said, but I did get remarried. And I said, when? And sometimes you have to take everything someone tells you, right? Especially, they could have dementia or not, but they can be in and out.
Right.
Like there's variations. And so I generally will take everything a person says, trust it, and follow up. So he said, I did get married the other day. I said, to who?
The other day?
It was like a week prior to me visiting. He says, Twinkle Toes. And I say, oh, who's Twinkle Toes?
Is this like from the club or something, or what?
He said she was a dancer, right?
Oh, no.
So I say, okay, what does she look like? And because nobody was there, I wasn't sure if he had a caretaker or not. I know the description of the people who took him into the bank based on the report. But I'm like, oh, it's Twinkle Toes. So he's like, yeah, she's a dancer, a great dancer. And he's telling me.
Oh, I bet she's a great dancer.
Yes. And he said, she helps take care of me. She takes care of me very well, right?
Oh, my God.
Okay.
Oh, my God.
I'm just sitting there like, all right, Twinkle Toes. Like, my notes to this day are so funny because it's like Twinkle Toes, right?
Yeah.
And he said, yes, he mentioned whoever else the other lady's name was. She brings her over. So it was the caretaker bringing her friend over. And
so was the caretaker in on it then?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Because she was very protective of him. She knew
was her
everything
friend
about
an
him.
exotic dancer?
She was a dancer. She was. And so at some point they did come in to justify what they did. Because I said, and the caretaker.
Did they really get married?
She owned the company too, which was worse. Like she owned the caretaking company. And
did they get married?
They did. They went to Wayne County Circuit Court and somebody married them.
Oh my God.
They went to the second floor to the clerk's office.
So this exotic dancer, who was how old?
She had to be probably 25 at the most.
Marries this elderly guy.
About 93.
So,
dementia.
Oh my God. That's so cruel and sad. I mean, but it happens, It
does.
And so the plan was probably they were going to take his money when he died, or what
They
was
changed they changed the account names, the titles and everything.
That's
she
horrible.
said, well, I only did it because I needed to be able to access his account. It was the caretaker who did it. She only did it. So I think she's using the dancer to
as
persuade
like a conduit.
him. And then she says, well, I'll still take care of you. So she adds her name. She says, but I only need it to do this so I can take care of him. Like I don't have to take him to the store to get things. Then again, we get the bank statements and it's like Lions games, Ford Phil, casino, MAC makeup. I go through MAC. I was like, how much MAC makeup does he wear?
Yeah.
We're going through these things and it's just like crazy because they'll still, the interesting part about these type of cases is they're going to stand by what they did, and they're going to say that person told me to do it, and who can defend that? And
so
that's what's
like
sad.
how do we fix this? Is there obviously like diligent judges, right? What are the tools? I mean, like in this case, how is it that you became involved? Like who looks out for the person who's being taken advantage of if they don't have a family or something? Does the court appoint somebody? Like what happens?
The court will appoint someone to do initial investigation. And if it goes further, then they appoint that person or someone else to stay on it and just follow it through.
And is that what's called a guardian ad litem?
Yes.
Or okay. So the court appoints like an independent attorney who reports to the court.
Yep.
Who's supposed to be kind of neutral, I guess, in it?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's just horrible to see that. And we see it time and time again. You talked about Anna Nicole Smith. Remember, she was like, I don't know, what was she? Like a exotic actress who married.
She was a dancer.
She was a dancer, famous. She was starred in movies.
She was gay when they met. She was with a
Really?
woman. Yes,
Really?
she was.
Yeah.
So
So for our
interesting.
younger listeners, Google Anna Nicole Smith because she married that guy who was what, like 90 years old?
Like an oil tycoon.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to do it,
She
do it. Anna
did it.
Nicole did.
She did it.
Not little
I
man in
think that
Livonia.
went up to,
Not
like,
the
the
man in
Supreme-
Livonia.
Yeah, right.
Go hard or go home.
Some poor guy who's
I'm
worked
just
his
kidding.
whole life, right? And so that went up to the Supreme Court. We saw that Britney Spears, that was in the news recently. Britney Spears had her dad became the guardian and then was funneling money out of her accounts and controlling. I mean, it's scary, right?
Yeah, that one was really hurtful too to see, because I think it was like since 2014, something like that. But the problem with that one is you can get a conservatorship. Like, she did have red flags. We all saw it while we're all growing up. We see like our hero like going clearly through some mental health crisis, and unfortunately,
but a lot
she's
of
in the
people
media.
go
They
through
do.
mental health crisis and they don't have a guardian appointed.
They don't have one for 8 years either.
Right.
And that's what was really frustrating about it, and watching it pan out as a probate attorney, is because at some point after it was instilled, like when it was established, her dad remained while she was still working. They had her working and issuing albums.
She was in Vegas. She was in Las Vegas doing the Britney show, and they were making her go to work. It was like, you know, she was trapped. She was like an indentured servant or something, you know?
And
like,
it's rare in cases in practice to see a conservatorship with someone who's grossing
fully
and
working.
fully working.
Yeah.
Unless they're minor children, like child stars or something like that, or they have some business. But here, that is not that. And it was so frustrating to watch because she was working and she was making money for everyone but
a lot
herself.
of money. Yeah. And I read her book and she talked about,
I love her book.
I know, Brittany. We miss you, Brittany. You know, the book talked about how like they would tell her who she could date or not date, and that they used these people because everybody had something to gain. Like her lawyer was getting paid a lot of money. Her lawyer, you know, it was some guy who was, everybody seemed to be
pushing it through, and they were okay with it. Like, she needed that one lawyer to say she's fine.
Yeah, right.
And they are all just getting paid. Her lawyer, his lawyer, whatever. There's probably a guardian ad litem.
That's what they say. Follow the money. It's all about, and this is something that I see is in my cases, money can help change people's lives and give them some comfort. If they're hurt, they can't work to support their family, whatever. I also see the evils that it can bring out under certain circumstances. And a lot of times, you know, we talk about probate, and I've talked about this on other shows, is when there's a wrongful death settlement, I see the worst brought out in people. Sometimes, okay, sometimes it's great. Everybody gets along. But, you know, I've been involved in cases where I just had a case that went up all the way up to the Supreme Court. A young woman died. A young woman died in prison. She was raised by her mother for the majority of her life. Okay. And she had a horrible death in prison. A wrongful death case was brought, and a lot of money came out. Okay. Like millions of dollars. Now, this girl's biological father, who had been out of the picture, who had been living in a different city, who saw this girl once a year, if most, who also was kind of disavowed by the family because he was anti-lesbian, anti-gay, and the deceased was gay. Mm-hmm. And so he had kind of disowned her for that. And so he suddenly comes out of the woodwork and says, why should get half this settlement, right? Half this settlement should go to me, half can go to the mom. And then tries to portray that he was this great father and that things. Now, look, losing a child, even if you're estranged, people have family problems. People do it. But it's really sad to see people pretend or suddenly care once the money's there. It's like, why didn't you care when your daughter was alive?
Yeah,
you know?
or likely needed you.
Likely needed you, right. Yeah. And we won. We won on that case. In fact, the court said it was unusual. The court said he got 0. Normally, they give a little bit. Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
They definitely do.
But it was really sad what happened. I said to him, because we had to do depositions, and I said, have you ever been to your daughter's gravesite? And he said, no. I said, you're here asking for all this money and you haven't even visited her grave? To me, that was so sad. He said, I don't know where the grave is. I said, we're going to write it down for you right now. Why don't you go on the way home? I don't know if he ever did, but to me, that said it all. Disgusting to me. The cruel. In our line of work, we can see the best of people and the worst of people.
Oh, yes. And probate, you'll generally see the worst.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but they will. There's always heirs. We call them heirs that come out of nowhere when there's certain cases opened.
Yeah.
But there have been interesting ones where we've had like illegitimate children who were like legit children of the decedent. Now that's always interesting too, because it's like, okay, wife, there's like a person dies, there's just a wife, she gets everything, and then it's like, bam, surprise.
Hi,
I'm 11, and that's where he was going to. That he was coming to see me when he was going to Atlanta.
Oh,
yes.
no.
No, I mean, it was sad for my client.
So what
I represent
happens,
wife.
like, what happens if there's an illegitimate child and somebody dies? Is an illegitimate child have the same rights as the legitimate? I mean, we're not like kings and queens with bastard childs of like, the medieval times anymore, right? Or what's the rights there?
Well, they do get they get half of the estate after the spouse gets like the first $235,000.
Yeah.
I believe it changes statutorily each year with inflation.
But they have rights too, right?
Yes, they do. And they can take half like of the remainder after spouse gets her spousal share.
Yeah. This is why people need to take care of this stuff, whether you have a $10,000 estate or a $10 million estate.
Yeah.
Because you do not want that to happen.
Yeah.
You don't want people fighting. It's horrible. All right. I want to thank you so much for being on the show today. We wish you the best of luck in your candidacy for Wayne County Circuit Court Judge in the probate court. I know you'll make an amazing, amazing judge. I can tell that you care, that you love probate. You hear probate, it's going to be boring, but it's not. And I can tell that you have a heart for it. And so thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me. I can't wait to watch more shows because crazy cases are really, they are entertaining. And if these are the ones that we talked about, I'm sure there's much more cooler ones.
Yeah. No. Hey, every case matters. And so thanks for being on Cases Gone Wild. And hopefully the next time we meet, I'll be calling you judge. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, everybody, thank you for listening to another amazing episode with Cases Gone Wild with Macie Gains as our special probate guest here today. Please, if you like us, please visit us online. If you or someone you know needs help, do not hesitate to reach out. We'll connect you to Macie Gains. We'll get you probate. We'll get you whatever you need. Go to www.markolaw.com or give us a call, 833 Marko Law. That's Marko Law. I'll see you in 2 weeks on another Cases Gone Wild.